Hi, I'm Phil Constantine, and this Travels with Phil goes to New York State and Fort Ticonderoga on Lake Champlain, a fort that started in 1755 by the French. You can see the map there. 1759, the British came in and took it over. 1775, Ethan Allen and U.S. forces came in and took it over. An aerial view there. And then in 1777, that's Ethan Allen supposedly getting the fort, and that's an old picture of it. And this is a modern day picture. These are mine. In 1777, the British took it away from the Americans. They eventually gave it up after the defeat they had at Saratoga, and it pretty well had no military use after about 1781. And about 1820, a family bought it, and it's been privately owned since then. It's now a basic tourist attraction. They do a lot of reenactments here, do all kinds of special programs. It's open during the late spring, summer, and early fall. And these are some of the dating signs that they have outside. They have lots of information here. They have some very, very good reenactors. A bit expensive, $20 some odd, as I recall. I had mentioned it later in one of the videos here. But lots and lots of information here, lots of old artifacts, old cannons, brass cannons, all kinds of different kinds of cannons out here. Some of them, the cannons were actually made to be used during the American Revolutionary War in Britain, and they just never got used during the war, and they purchased them and brought them here. I'm not sure if they have any actual cannons that were left from the fort itself, but again, these are all real cannons, so they're not just made up to look like cannons. And you can see them pointing out now. The fort itself is on a peninsula, has the river goes right by it, and then across the river was another fort they call Fort Independence. Wasn't as built up as this one was, and you can see this has got all kinds of walls, buildings on the inside. There was a nearby mountain called Mount Defiance. It had various other names over the years, and that had a good look over here, so people that were trying to attack the fort here would often go up there to try to get the high ground. Originally, when the French had it, it was called Fort Carillon, C-A-R-R-I-L-L-I-O-N, I believe. This is where they did some of the cooking. The reenactors are actually showing how the people who were the cooks would start fires, cook things like bread, and all of the venison and whatever kinds of meat and vegetables they may have had out there. Lots of plaques out here. So again, this is the real thing, even though it's owned by a private family. These are some of the reenactors. If you look on my videos, you'll see where I have an almost 20-minute video of them doing a demonstration of how they used flintlock rifles and a little bit of the marching. Now, this is the gateway to get inside the fort, the central part, the parade grounds, as it were. And this is taken from inside the park, or I mean inside the fort itself. And these were what they would normally call the parade grounds, a little triangular thing there over the well. And they have a very nice museum. We'll get to that in just a little bit. So just some more plaques out here of various events that took place either here or around here, or that where the fort was an important part. I like the chimney there partially coming out of the wall. And then, also the people that were involved here, various folks came through here, all kinds of folks came through here, George Washington, Ethan Allen, Benedict Arnold, all kinds of people that you would recognize from history came through this fort at one time or another. They may not have spent much time here, but they definitely did. There's the reenactors marching out to do the demonstration where they show you how the flintlocks actually worked, and that was an interesting thing. I mean, they explained all the parts, the processes, the steps they took to keep from shooting each other. And it's not funny if you were doing it for real, but it's very educational and interesting at the same time. And the flag is out there, and I'll show you a little flag raising in just a bit here. These are some of the mortars or howitzers, and they all had interesting designs. If you're going to be casting something like this, you can go ahead and make it artistic at the same time. Didn't take a whole lot more. That's some sort of fish or a dolphin there where you light the flame. And the big handle's there, so it can be moved, raised, elevated, whichever is appropriate for the purposes that they're going to use it for. And you can see out here a little bit of a picture of the outside walls with the inside barracks and storehouses and museums and whatever it is that they have now. Some more of the many guns, and I just like the ornamentation on the guns themselves, royals, insignia, etc. And the walls are mostly still standing, but they've had to do some repair work. I mean, obviously this thing is, you know, a couple of 260, 70 years old now. So let's go look at the flag raising out here by a couple of reenactors. This is outside. This is a video I shot in 2016, 2017. I can't remember. I have to go look it up. No particular significance to this other than I just like to see it.
And that starts the day at Fort Ticonderoga over Lake Champlain. And Mount Defiance.
Alrighty, the museum. They have lots and lots and lots of things inside the museum. It is very nicely done. Lots of display cases, lots of informative signs that tell you about what's going on, what's happening. These are going by fairly quickly. You can always pause them if you'd like to. The Brown Bess musket, the go-to musket for a long time amongst the British and a lot of Americans as well. And if you'd like to see some of these pictures in a more delayed fashion, look below in the description section underneath the video here, and I'll provide a link to my website where all of my still photos are. And you know, I probably have 100 some odd photos from Fort Ticonderoga and the museum and Mount Defiance. And so, you know, some of the old pictures here, the guns that came from here, the guns that came from Fort Crown Point, were eventually transported to other spots, Boston as one example, and Ethan Allen was one of the people that helped transport these guns, and that was very, very important for the defense of the American cause, was having all of these cannons that were recovered during various times. Old iron plate there, or chest plate. Indians did have some activity here, and you can see some of the models of all the various French, English, American-made weaponry, and there are lots of it. These are powder horns, and the basic way the gun works is you put a little bit of powder inside the priming hole, and then you put your ball or whatever it is you're going to, the bullet for lack of a better term, down into the bullet, put some wadding in there, just paper or whatever, and then you put some powder as well in there, and then push it all down, and then use flint, and that's why they call it a flint lock. The flint will scrape across a steel part. The spark will ignite the powder that you put down there in the priming hole, which sets off the powder that's inside the barrel, which shoots the bullets out. A very, very proficient infantry person who had been trained and trained and trained could maybe do one shot every 10 seconds or so if they were all prepared with the various parts put in places where they needed to be. And it was this way when they were actually doing wars and doing real fights. So they could get maybe 6, a little bit more, a little bit less shots off per minute. And they would try to set these people up in various rows so that while one group was reloading, the other groups would be firing, so there'd be a constant source of fire downrange toward the enemy. And again, lots and lots of cannons out here. So, this, I mean, obviously it's a fort. It was designed to protect an area, to provide a place for the military folks to stay, the soldiers, etc., to stay, and to protect the surrounding people, but also to work as a place where you could defend yourself against invading armies. It was very important for some cases for the armies to take the forts, because that was always a place where soldiers could stay, and if you were just bypassing the forts, well, eventually they could come out of the fort and attack you. So that's why there was so much activity that went on in trying to occupy forts. These are some of the excuse me, very nice cannons inside. I don't include it here because it's very long, but if you go to my YouTube page, you will see that I have maybe a 10-15 minute lecture by somebody here in the museum talking about the way that the cannons and the guns worked. Now outside, they had what was called the King's Garden. And this could have been used also as a place to raise food for the people inside. They also just made it, it added to the tourist attraction The people who bought this, the private family that bought this in the 1820s, built a resort out here, a hotel, etc. And they put also, enhanced the gardens to make sure that they would be pretty and make it a nice place to stay for the kind of folks who could come up from New York and the various spots around to Albany and the other larger towns to come out here. So it made it a luxury resort of a sort for its era and time. Excuse me. And now they also raise a lot of animals out here as if it were the 1750s, the 1770s, the heydays of when this was actually a working, functioning fort for the military. So I happen to like the flowers and the various stuff out here. I've seen enough chickens, but it is very nicely done, very prettily put together, and it's all part of the package deal when you're out here visiting the park. Whoop, a little panorama there. I do like my panoramas. And some of the buildings that are out here, a nice view out there of the Lake Champlain. I always thought Lake Champlain and all of those lakes were kind of directly connected to the Hudson, but it turns out they're not. And then finally, Mount Defiance. There's a picture here from the ground pointing up toward it, and you can see it from Fort Ticonderoga. So let's go to the video I took up at Mount Defiance.
Travels with Phil continues. That is Fort Ticonderoga. I am up on Mount Defiance. Zoom out a little bit here, and you can see that it actually is a peninsula. That's Lake Champlain off to the left. Vermont on the far side of the lake. That would be Mount Independence, even though it's not much of a mount there, where they did another fort on the other side, the Americans eventually. Lake Champlain continues on toward the south, and if you go far enough south you get to New York City and the Atlantic Ocean and all those other places. Beautiful view up here. Now this is privately owned. It's operated by a nonprofit historical association. Family bought Fort Ticonderoga a long time ago, and over the space of over 100 years they've been building it up. And it is maybe even longer than 100 years, but it's been a tourist attraction, or at least open to the public for a fee for quite some time. But this is just a gorgeous view up here, Mount Defiance. Now, if you buy a ticket to Fort Ticonderoga, which was I think $22 for an adult, I got a couple bucks off because I was a AAA member. If you're over 65, you get a couple bucks off. Kids are less than that. So it's not cheap, but they do a lot of reenactments, as you've seen from the other videos. Lots of information. They've rebuilt it all up on their own. They get no funding from any other outside sources unless somebody wants to donate it to them. In fact, one of the halls they've got there is called the Mars Halls, but the Mars Hall, because the makers of M&Ms gave them the money. And as the tour guy said, all right, no Snickers. I'll snicker anyway. But just a gorgeous view up here from the viewpoint. A little pavilion here, so you can come up and bring a picnic lunch. If you want to come here separately, it's $10. If you get your day pass to Fort Ticonderoga, they give you a little token that you can use at the machine to get in here, and it's included as part of the ticket. So, but just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I'll zoom in a little bit down the river here, down the lake, I should say. Now, for a long time, I'd been under the misconception that Lake Champlain was part of the Hudson River, but it's not. So that was really surprising to me. Beautiful, beautiful from Mount Defiance, overlooking Fort Ticonderoga, New York, and Vermont, right over there. Somewhere over there is my brother Michael.
Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up by clicking on the button below. You're welcome to leave comments below as long as the language is family friendly. And finally, if you'd like to see more of my videos, please subscribe to my channel by clicking the button over on the bottom right-hand corner. Thank you again for watching.